You ever wake up one day and realize your life has turned into one of those dull, predictable routines you swore you'd never fall into? That was me. Write in the comments where you're listening to us from. Once you hear the story, you will be shocked at how one little thing affects it, completely changing the rules of the game. My name's Natalie, I'm 36, and I live in the suburbs of Portland. A place where lawns are trimmed to perfection, where neighbors smile but never really talk, and where the biggest excitement in my week was choosing between red or white wine for dinner. I've been married to Daniel for 10 years. He's a good man, steady, responsible, always pays the bills on time. The kind of guy your parents would nod approvingly at. But somewhere along the way, our marriage shifted. Not in some dramatic, door-slamming, cheating scandal kind of way. No, it was quieter than that. Like a song that used to be your favorite, but now just plays in the background, unnoticed. Daniel worked long hours downtown. By the time he got home, he'd loosen his tie, grab a beer, and sink into the couch with the TV remote like it was the only thing that could save him. Conversations between us had boiled down to schedules, grocery lists, and the occasional, "How was your day?" that neither of us really wanted an answer to. I felt invisible. And not in the dramatic, movie scene kind of way. More like faded. Like a once bright color left too long in the sun. I dress up sometimes, put on something nice, curl my hair, hoping he'd notice. But he never did. The most I'd get was a distracted, "You look nice," before he went back to whatever was on his phone. The worst part? I wasn't even mad at him. It wasn't like he was cruel or neglectful. He was just indifferent. And maybe I was too. Maybe we both had just accepted that this was marriage now. But then, something changed. It started small. A nagging thought, a restless feeling. Like an itch under my skin that wouldn't go away. One evening, scrolling through my phone, I stumbled on some article titled, "How to Bring Passion Back into Your Life." It was one of those clickbait self-help pieces, the kind you skim at 2 a.m. when you can't sleep. But one line stuck with me. Sometimes, all it takes to rediscover yourself is to let your curiosity lead the way. I didn't know why, but those words got under my skin. That night, lying in bed next to Daniel, listening to his slow, steady breathing, I realized something. I didn't want to keep fading away. I needed something more. And I had no idea that more was about to walk right into my life. It wasn't like I woke up the next morning ready to throw my life into chaos. No, it was more subtle than that. A shift. A thought that lingered a little too long. I needed something different, something just for me. That's how I ended up at the gym. It wasn't some grand plan. I just figured a new routine might shake things up. Get me out of the house, get my body moving, maybe even give me something to talk about at dinner besides whether we were out of milk. So I signed up, bought a pair of leggings that actually fit, and walked into that place like I belonged there. I didn't. The gym was packed with the kind of people who knew exactly what they were doing. Lean women in matching sets, guys with arms like tree trunks, people who looked like they lived for the burn. And then there was me, standing awkwardly by the treadmills, trying to figure out how not to look like an idiot. But I pushed through. I climbed onto the elliptical, set it to a reasonable pace, and lost myself in the movement. And for a little while, it worked. My mind went quiet. My body hummed with something that almost felt like energy. And then I saw him. He was across the gym helping some guy with the weights. Tall. Broad shoulders. Dark hair that was just messy enough to look effortless. There was something about the way he carried himself, calm, confident, like he owned the space without even trying. I didn't know his name yet, but I knew I was watching him longer than I should have. It wasn't even attraction, not at first. It was more like curiosity. The way he moved, the way he laughed at something his friends said, the way his presence filled the room without demanding attention. He was alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. And just like that, the thought crept in before I could stop it. What if someone looked at me like that? I shook it off, forced my focus back to the screen in front of me, but my rhythm was off now. My heart wasn't just racing from the workout. That night, sitting across from Daniel at the dinner table, I picked at my food, waiting to feel something, anything. "How was your day?" he asked, not looking up from his plate. "The gym was good," I said. "That's nice." And that was it. Conversation over. Meanwhile, my mind was still back there, in that gym, lingering on a face I didn't even know. I wasn't looking for trouble. But maybe, just maybe, trouble had already found me. The thing about curiosity, once it's there, it doesn't just go away. It lingers, settles in, makes itself at home. I told myself it was nothing, just a passing thought, a harmless distraction. But the next time I went to the gym, I caught myself scanning the room before I even stepped onto the elliptical. And there he was. This time, I let myself watch for a second longer. He wasn't like the others, wasn't obsessed with his reflection in the mirror, wasn't flexing or grunting like some of the guys near the free weights. He just belonged there, like it was as natural to him as breathing. I had no intention of speaking to him. That wasn't why I was there. I was just going to work out, burn some calories, go home, and pretend my heart wasn't racing for reasons that had nothing to do with cardio. But fate had other plans. I was adjusting the seat on a leg press machine, fumbling with the lever, when a voice cut through the hum of weights and running treadmills. "You might want to pull that up first, unless you're trying to fold yourself in half." I turned, and there he was, closer than I expected. Those dark eyes locked onto mine, amusement flickering across his face. Thanks," I said, immediately feeling ridiculous. He crouched beside me, effortlessly adjusting the machine like it was second nature. "There. That should work." I nodded, suddenly hyper-aware of how close he was. "I appreciate it. No problem. First week here? Was it that obvious?" "Something like that." He smiled, really smiled, and it did something to me. Like I'd been standing in a dim room for years, and someone had just flipped on the lights. "I'm Ryan, by the way." "Natalie." "Well, Natalie, if you ever need help avoiding gym-related injuries, I'm usually around." It was a simple exchange. Friendly. Casual. But as he walked away, something shifted inside me. Because for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. And I wasn't sure I was ready for what that meant. I told myself it was nothing. A polite exchange. A friendly moment between two people in a public space. But that didn't explain why I kept thinking about it. Or why, the next time I walked into the gym, my eyes automatically searched for him. And when I found him, lifting weights near the squat rack, his muscles flexing with every movement, I didn't look away. I should have. Instead, I got on the elliptical, set my pace, and let my thoughts wander in a way they shouldn't have. I didn't even notice him walking over until I saw his reflection in the screen. "Elliptical again?" Ryan teased, leaning against the machine next to mine. I pulled out an earbud, hoping my voice sounded steadier than I felt. "I like my routine." He smirked. "Routine's good, but sometimes change is better." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. A casual statement, but layered with something else. Something dangerous. I should have shut it down, laughed it off, kept the conversation short. Instead, I heard myself say, "Maybe. Got any recommendations?" His smirk widened. "Plenty. But you have to trust me." That word, trust, lingered between us. I shouldn't have entertained it. But there was something about Ryan, something effortless, something that made me feel awake in a way I hadn't in years. So when he said, "Coffee after your workout?" I knew the answer should have been no. But I also knew what I was going to say before I even opened my mouth. "Sure. Why not?" And just like that, I took my first real step onto a path I wasn't sure I could walk back from. I told myself it was just coffee. Two people, sitting across from each other, having a casual conversation. Nothing more. But deep down, I knew better. We met at a little cafe a few blocks from the gym, the kind of place with exposed brick walls and the smell of fresh espresso clinging to the air. I got there first, my fingers drumming against the table, my pulse louder than it should have been. Then Ryan walked in, and suddenly, I wasn't thinking about coffee anymore. Didn't bail on me, he said, sliding into the seat across from me. Was I supposed to? I shot back, trying to sound unfazed. He grinned. Nah. But I wasn't sure you would. The way he said it, like he knew exactly what this was, exactly what line we were towing, made my stomach flip. We talked. About workouts, about music, about how the city had changed over the years. Easy, comparable. But underneath the words, something was building. I felt it in the way he leaned in slightly when I spoke. The way his eyes flicked to my lips when I sipped my drink. And I knew he felt it too when his fingers brushed mine on the table, lingering for just a second longer than they should have. A test. I could have pulled away. I should have pulled away. Instead, I let it happen. And that's when I knew I wasn't just flirting with danger. I was inviting it in. I told myself that coffee didn't mean anything, that I could walk away, chalk it up to a harmless distraction, and go back to my normal life. But I didn't. Instead, I found myself checking my phone more often, waiting for a message I wasn't even sure would come. And when it did, same time tomorrow? I didn't hesitate before typing, yeah, why not? That tomorrow turned into the next day. And the next. Coffee became a habit, a secret routine. And with each meeting, the tension between us grew thicker, sharper, impossible to ignore. One afternoon, after a workout that left my legs shaking, we sat in his car instead of the cafe. Rain drummed softly against the windshield, turning the world outside into a blur of motion and color. Inside, it was just us, the air humming with something unsaid. You ever feel like you're just existing? I asked, staring at my hands. Ryan didn't answer right away. When I looked up, he was watching me, not just looking, but seeing me in a way I hadn't felt in years. Yeah, he finally said. Ido. His voice was low, rough, and suddenly the space between us felt too small. I should have left. I should have opened the door, stepped out into the rain, and driven home like none of this had ever happened. Instead, I turned to him, and he didn't hesitate. His hand brushed my cheek, fingertips barely there, testing, waiting. And when I didn't pull away, he leaned in. The first kiss was slow, deliberate. A question. The second? An answer. By the time I finally came up for air, my heart was hammering against my ribs. My lips tingled, my breath uneven, my entire body alive in a way that felt reckless and dangerous and completely intoxicating. Ryan exhaled, forehead resting against mine. Tell me to stop. I opened my mouth. The words should have been easy, but I didn't say them. Because the truth was, I didn't want him to stop. And that terrified me more than anything. I should have felt guilty. The moment I walked through my front door, I should have been hit with the crushing weight of what I had just done. But I wasn't. Instead, I stood in my dark kitchen, my fingers still tingling from Ryan's touch, my lips swollen from his kiss, and all I felt was alive. Daniel was in the living room, exactly where I left him, slouched on the couch, eyes glued to the TV. He barely looked up when I walked in. Jim go okay? I hesitated, my heartbeat still unsteady. Yeah, I said, forcing my voice to sound normal. It was good. And just like that, the moment passed. No suspicion. No questions. Like nothing had changed. Except everything had. The next day, I told myself I wouldn't see Ryan. That last night had been a mistake, one I needed to bury before it spiraled out of control. But when my phone buzzed, my stomach flipped before I even read the message. Meet me after? A dozen excuses ran through my mind. I could say no. I could end this before it began. Instead, I found myself typing back. Where? We met at a quiet bar just outside the city, the kind of place where no one asked questions. I parked in the back, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I could turn around. I could walk away and pretend none of this had happened. But then Ryan stepped out of his car, his eyes locking onto mine through the windshield. And just like that, my resolve shattered. Inside, we sat in a booth tucked into the corner, away from prying eyes. The lighting was dim, the air thick with the scent of whiskey and something deeper, something unspoken. "This is dangerous," I murmured, more to myself than to him. Ryan smirked, tracing the rim of his glass with one finger. "You say that like you want to stop." I swallowed hard. "Do you?" His eyes darkened. "Not even a little." A beat of silence stretched between us, heavy, loaded. Then his hand brushed mine under the table, and that one simple touch set my entire body on fire. "We can't do this," I whispered, but I didn't pull away. Ryan leaned in, his voice low, rough. "Then tell me to leave." I opened my mouth. The words didn't come, because the truth was, I didn't want him to leave. I wanted more. And that realization? It was more dangerous than anything we'd done so far. I didn't recognize myself anymore. Not in the mirror, not in the quiet moments when Daniel sat next to me at dinner, scrolling through his phone, not even in the way my own body reacted when Ryan touched me. Because this wasn't just an affair anymore. It was an addiction. And I had lost control. It started with small things. A little more effort with my makeup, wearing perfume to the gym, even though I told myself it was just out of habit. Checking my phone too often, feeling that jolt of excitement every time his name flashed on the screen. I told myself we could keep it contained, just the gym, just coffee, just a few stolen kisses. But that's the thing about crossing a line. Once you do, it doesn't exist anymore. I started making excuses to see him. A late-night run to the store, when I wasn't out of anything. Extended workouts that had nothing to do with fitness. Lunch breaks where I wasn't eating. I became an expert at slipping away. And at home, I played my part perfectly. Dinner was always made. The house was clean. I laughed at Daniel's half-hearted jokes, nodded at his stories from work, kissed his cheek before bed. If anything, I was better at being a wife now. Because the guilt? It never came. Only the thrill. One evening, after another excuse, I might stay late at the gym, don't wait up. I ended up in Ryan's car, parked in the farthest corner of a dimly lit lot. We barely spoke. We didn't have to. The second I got in, his hands were on me, pulling me onto his lap, his breath hot against my neck. My body reacted before my mind could catch up, already surrendering to the fire burning between us. His fingers tangled in my hair as his lips moved against mine, rough, desperate, possessive. I should have been afraid of how much I wanted him. Instead, I let myself drown in it. By the time I finally pulled away, my breathing ragged, my heart still hammering against my ribs, I knew I should go home. I should. But the way Ryan's hands tightened on my waist, the way his eyes darkened as he whispered, "Stay," made me forget every reason I had to leave. And I did. It was past midnight when I finally pulled into my driveway, my legs still weak from everything Ryan had done to me. I stepped inside, kicking off my shoes, already mentally preparing an excuse if Daniel woke up. Then I saw him. He wasn't in bed. He wasn't on the couch. He was sitting at the kitchen table, in the dim glow of the overhead light. Not watching TV. Not looking at his phone. Waiting. The sight of him sent a jolt through my chest. Something was wrong. I forced a smile. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice casual. "What are you doing up?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He just stared at me, his face unreadable. Then, after what felt like forever, he spoke. "Who is he?" The air left my lungs. The room tilted. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. My mind scrambled for something, anything, but I couldn't think, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I had been so careful, so sure that I had played my role well enough to keep my two lives separate. But now, under the weight of my husband's stare, I realized the truth. I wasn't as invisible as I thought. And I had just run out of time. Time stretched, thick and suffocating, as Daniel's question hung between us. Who is he? The words weren't loud. They weren't angry. But they carried the weight of something sharp, something final. I swallowed hard, forcing my face to stay neutral, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. What are you talking about? I said, aiming for confusion, but landing somewhere closer to guilt. Daniel didn't move, didn't blink. His fingers drummed once, twice, against the table before he leaned back in his chair, exhaling slow, measured. I'm not an idiot, Natalie. His voice was eerily calm. Too calm. You think I haven't noticed? Noticed what? I wanted to ask, to feign innocence, to twist this into something I could still control. But I knew. He had noticed everything. The late nights. The sudden interest in the gym. The way I had come back to life. But not because of him. I opened my mouth, but he cut me off. I see you on your phone, he continued, his tone razor-sharp but steady. You smile at it like you used to smile at me. His jaw tightened, his hands balling into fists before he forced them flat against the table. So, I'll ask you again.
Who is
he? Panic flared up my spine, hot and blinding. My mind raced through a dozen ways out, a dozen different lies, but every single one tasted bitter before I could even speak them.
Lie. Deny.
Deflect. That was the smart thing to do. But when I looked at Daniel, really looked, I saw something worse than anger in his eyes. I saw heartbreak. And for the first time since this all started, the weight of what I had done began to settle in my chest, cold and suffocating. I could see the exact moment he realized the truth, before I even said it. His whole body tensed, shoulders rigid, breath caught in his throat. Still, he waited. And like a coward, I looked away. A slow, bitter laugh left his lips. Jesus Christ, he muttered, running a hand over his face. He nodded to himself, like he was confirming something he had already suspected. It's real, then. A statement. Not a question. I could have denied it. Should have. But instead, I whispered, Daniel, He shot up from the chair so fast it scraped against the tile. Don't. His voice was low, shaking with something raw, something dangerous. Don't lie to me. Not now. I flinched. Not because I was afraid he'd hurt me. Daniel had never been that kind of man. But because, for the first time in years, he wasn't indifferent. He was furious. And I had put that fire there. He turned away, gripping the edge of the counter, his back rising and falling with unsteady breaths. For a moment, I thought maybe he wouldn't say anything else. Maybe he'd let it drop, let it simmer, let us both pretend that this conversation had never happened. But then he laughed, cold and hollow, and turned back to me. Does he make you happy? The question hit like a slap. Because I didn't have an answer. And that silence? That silence was the worst thing I could have given him. Daniel nodded slowly, like that was all he needed to hear. Then, without another word, he walked past me, grabbed his car keys, and slammed the door behind him. The house shook. And just like that, my carefully built lie came crashing down. The house felt empty, without Daniel in it. Not just quiet, but hollow. Like something essential had been ripped out, leaving only the ruins behind. I stood there, staring at the door he had slammed behind him, expecting, what? That he'd come back? That I'd hear his car return? That we'd sit down and fix this like rational adults?
No.
I knew exactly what I had done, and I knew there was no coming back from it. My hands trembled as I gripped the counter. My breath came in short, shallow bursts, panic creeping up my spine like a slow, icy drip. This was the moment I had been dreading since the first time I let Ryan touch me, since the first kiss, the first lie. I had convinced myself I was in control, that I could keep both worlds separate. But now the walls had collapsed, and all that was left was wreckage. And I couldn't stay here. The air in the house was too thick, suffocating me with the scent of Daniel's cologne, the framed wedding photos staring back at me from the hallway, the half-empty coffee cup he had left on the table this morning, back when we were still pretending. My feet moved before my brain could catch up. I grabbed my keys, my bag. The weight in my chest grew heavier with every step toward the door, like I was physically walking away from the life I had spent 10 years building. I got in the car. I drove. I told myself I didn't know where I was going, but that was a lie. Ryan's apartment was dark when I arrived. The hallway smelled like old carpet and cigarette smoke, the kind of place that belonged to someone who never expected to stay for long. I stood at his door for a moment, my pulse hammering so loudly I swore I could hear it echo off the walls. I shouldn't have come here. I should have been anywhere else. But I wasn't. I knocked, and within seconds, the door swung open. He looked at me, eyes scanning my face, taking in the wreckage of my expression, my uneven breath, the way my hands curled into fists at my sides. I stepped past him, the door clicking shut behind me. Everything about this space was unfamiliar. The dim glow from the kitchen, the faint smell of whiskey and aftershave, the silence stretching between us. I had left one life in ruins. And now, standing in this dimly lit apartment, I realized I had already chosen the next one. Because as much as I wanted to believe I could go back, that I could undo what had been done, I knew the truth. I had crossed the line, and there was no turning back. The moment I stepped into Ryan's apartment, something felt off. The air was thick, too still, like the world had been holding its breath, waiting for me to walk straight into something I didn't see coming. My body should have recognized it, that split-second instinct before a disaster strikes. But I was too caught up in the storm inside my own head to listen. I dropped my bag on the floor, exhaling, trying to steady myself, to feel something other than the crushing weight of what I had done. My marriage was over, and here I was, standing in a place that had once felt like escape, like freedom, but now felt like something else. Something I couldn't name yet. Ryan stood in the middle of the room, watching me. Not the way he usually did. Not with that confident, knowing smirk. This time, there was something different in his eyes. And then I saw it. A second glass on the coffee table. Lipstick on the rim. The faintest hint of perfume lingering in the air, not mine. The floor tilted beneath me. My stomach twisted. My breath caught somewhere between disbelief and something darker. Something worse. Then, before I could even process what I was looking at, movement caught my eye. A shadow shifting in the hallway. And then, a woman stepped out of Ryan's bedroom, wearing nothing but his shirt. Her eyes met mine, widening in surprise, in amusement, not guilt. Like she had been expecting this. Expecting me. And then she smiled. A slow, knowing smile that made my skin go cold. The ground beneath me disappeared. And that was the moment I realized I wasn't the only one living a lie.